Hi. Quick reminder. The opinions and views expressed by my guests in this episode don't necessarily reflect mine or those of the show. Not every episode, but some episodes this season, we talk about very deep, serious subjects. So if at any point you need to take a pause from listening or watching, please do so. Your mental well-being is far more important to me than any listener metrics. And the show will always be here when you're ready to come back. All right? Let's go. Hi, I'm Adam Jennings, and this is Awaiting Approval. And we're back once more with the Recruiter Roundtable. In clockwise order from my screen, we have Tom Scott, Erica Fortgang, Meg Rye, Laura Baker, Toby Thwaite, and Sam Gale joining us for part 2 of what was the most highly downloaded episode of season 2. Team, thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you for having us.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
I know that we're recording this in the middle, for those of us that are in the UK, in the middle of a stonking heat wave. So apologies now for the drowned rat appearance. You are all looking remarkably fresh. So I don't know whether this is like some kind of filter that you've applied or whether you're just dealing better with the heat than I am, but it's good to see. Thank you. To kick us off, last time we recorded, I asked you all to describe recruitment for 2025 in a word. Jared, who can't join us this time around, described it as brutal. So I'm going to hand that one to you, Tom. Erica, you said struggle. Meg, you said chaos. Sam, you said messy. Laura, you said exciting. How are those words feeling for you now, almost 6 months on?
I'm actually shocked about how positive I was in that word. I'd completely forgotten what I said. I was thinking, what brutal thing was I saying? I was like, oh, exciting. Okay. I think I almost stick with the same word. I think we're in a moment where there's more momentum now. It's not all positivity. I won't go anywhere near that, but I think there is more to be excited about right now anyway.
That's good. That's a positive start. How are the rest of you feeling about your words?
I think that mine was struggle. And I would say my new word is confusing. I think with AI, things are changing like daily, pretty much, for design at least. And so the requirements are just shifting like so fast. And the perfect profile is changing, but we can't change people that fast. So for me, it's like I don't know what people are looking for.
So you're moving from struggle to confused.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Sam, you're going to jump in with yours.
I was going to say the biggest surprising thing is I can't believe it's almost 6 months since the last one. That blows my mind a little bit. I said messy last time. I think I'm going to keep messy, but momentum also feels like the good partner to go with that. The market definitely feels like we're moving a little bit more than it was, but messy movement is still fitting. There's still a lot of figuring out what definitions of roles look like, what good talent looks like, what org structures are starting to look like. And that's happening on both sides of the fence. So messy with momentum definitely feels fitting.
I like it. It's also a great folk album, Messy Momentum. Meg, how are you feeling about chaos?
I still feel the chaos. And I guess I would add on maybe what Sam's saying. My new word might be shifting, because I think we are seeing some people in the market and companies who are creating new types of roles, evolving the design discipline and the roles alongside the way that they create products. And so I think actually moving towards some sort of new definition can sometimes be helpful. It's something that we can press up against and sort of learn and evolve together. I'm curious what Tom thinks, because he's entering with his first word to describe the market right now.
I would say momentum. I think the market has strong momentum, specifically in sort of AI native companies. So I think the word will vary of what type of recruiter or who you're speaking to, who their clients are, what location they're in. I think in Europe in particular, it's really a strong period of growth for design in various companies. Lots of companies are moving here, such as, Lovable, Synthesia are growing here, 11 Labs, Cursor, OpenAI, Anthropic. So I think we've got strong momentum in that realm, but I don't know about the other sort of areas as such, really. So I would say momentum. I think the profiles are definitely shifting. So the archetype of product designers is definitely more of like a product designer who ships. It's a more technical profile, and like as Erica said, like we can't change people that fast. So that it feels like when you're going out to the market and trying to fill these roles, there's not as many people. The bar is higher, for sure.
Right. Right.
I would say I wouldn't say the bar is higher. I'd say the bar's changed. I think that's probably the better way of putting it, because there's still great people out there who are maybe more, UX or service design focused, who maybe aren't getting the same opportunities that a more visually focused designer will get. Because when people say, "Oh, we want someone with like strong craft," majority of people actually what they mean is visual craft. Sorry, I dissected a little bit there, but
that's all right.
Yeah, I'd say momentum. I think it's messy, it's confusing, but we've got momentum. We're going in the right direction. It feels for design, product design.
Cool. So we've got a double vote for momentum. Toby, bring us home. Your word for the state of recruitment right now.
Yeah, I didn't get a word last time, so maybe I can have 2 words this time. But when I look at the external market, the word that kind of springs to mind is probably change, and that's in kind of good ways and bad ways. We have clients, it's kind of Tom talked about. We have clients figuring out exactly where they want to hire and entering into new markets and geographies to build teams. We've got companies that don't know whether they're kind of coming or going when it comes to hiring, and there's a lot of stop-start in the market. There's lots of budget issues in agencies and consultancies, so we see lots of change in the recruitment process itself. But weirdly, when I look at the work that I do, certainly over the last year and this year, I think like meaningful is a good word, and that's not necessarily because the market's in a great place. It's probably because the market's been in a tougher place, but I definitely kind of attribute a bit more meaning to the work that I've been doing, and I feel that a lot more when you hire someone into a role now. There's certainly more kind of gratitude, relief, and kind of meaning attached to that for me. So yeah, meaning and change would be my 2 words.
Love it. I'm excited in 6 months to a year's time to see what this changes even more, because this feels like quite positive. Would you all agree? Like it feels like there's signs of growth, signs of positivity, or am I just sort of holding on to straws?
I think the other bit to mention around change, I think that's a great point, is the roles are sort of like blurring into one. There's more expectations for designers to do more of the PM work, and then there's like more on the front end. So I think definitely change is a great word, Toby.
And I would add that I think that there are a lot of folks out there who don't think it's all good, right? Because like those who are like working at the cutting edge of AI, like you were saying, Tom, like people who know how to operate at the AI layer, like modeling behavior and evals and things like that, or design engineers or the PD, PM hybrids who also have high craft, they're getting all the jobs. And then the service designers and the UX designers and the content designers who came up in a time when, 10 years ago, it was much easier to get a job, and there were maybe less jobs on the market, but there were also less people competing for those jobs. So I think with all of the layoffs and things like that, there's still a lot of churn and a lot of people who are maybe sitting on the market for 3, 6, 10, 18 months who, previously they would have gotten a job in a couple of weeks. So I think that there's also a little bit of like, how do people either evolve their skills or pitch themselves in a different way? And do they go more the AI route? Do they go more the engineering route? Do they go more the craft and execution route? And I don't think that there's any one answer, but we're all sort of trying to pull together the information as it's happening and evolving and help educate our clients and each other.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other thing is like knowing within what Tom and Meg just said, like where is your experience and where are you going towards? Because there is such a big difference in terms of what Tom was saying about the kind of like AI tech forward startups versus the larger enterprise organizations, and they're kind of worlds apart in unsurprisingly that they always have been, right? And I was laughing with someone last night. I was like, AI for a service designer is like, here's a Copilot license, go and speed up your research synthesis. Like that's the extent of people using AI in those environments for the most part. Like it's not fundamentally changing in the same way that a process for a visually led product designer might be changing in some of these other kind of companies. So there is a real, to kind of take it back to Erica's point on the confusion or messiness, I think was maybe it was Sam's that said messiness. Like there's so much, it's not even nuance, it's kind of it's wider than nuance. There's a lot of kind of discrepancy in the market as well, and confusion, to what other people have said, from what companies are asking for and what they really need. Like they might be asking for one thing because they think that that's what they need to be asking for, but actually that's not what they need. And so there's a role in helping them really get to the baseline of like, actually, who is the person that you need? It might not be at a leadership level or at an IC level. It might, the person that they need might not be the person that they're actually asking for and looking for. So I think there's a role to be played there as well.
Yeah, do you know what the other thing I think about a lot for people is, and this kind of adds to the messiness and confusion. I really feel for designers having to kind of pitch themselves or explain what they do to so many people, because at the other end I have clients that really like hearing certain things, and then I have different clients who would hate hearing exactly the same thing, and that's basically an impossible challenge for people to know how to articulate, not necessarily like what they do in like semantic terms, saying like I'm a product designer, I'm a UX designer, but to give you an example, I still have clients that are very kind of against hiring like product designers that would call themselves, like AI powered product designers, for example. They would look at that and go, that's just not what we look for at all. And they look for something else. So I feel like it's such a minefield in candidates, just even having to articulate themselves to so many different people and, hit the right notes when they do it. I think that's so difficult.
What would be your piece of advice for them?
Great question. I mean, I feel like candidates that work with people like us have it slightly easier because we create a layer between them and the end client, and we can almost, engineer that for them. Work with a recruiter feels like a bit of a lazy answer in that space. I think for me, I always thing that I always encourage people to do is try to keep things as neutral as possible. Like, don't get me wrong, like I love, personality and authenticity, but if you don't really know who you're, let's use the word, kind of like selling to or pitching to, I think keeping language as kind of neutral middle ground as possible is, probably a sensible place to start. But it's a great question. It's a really hard question to answer.
Anyone else got any sort of bits of advice along those lines?
I think I would, I hear what you're saying there, Toby. And I guess another approach might be, how do we help candidates have a certain amount of self-awareness so they can go into an interview knowing exactly what their strengths and weaknesses are, and ultimately then close that gap with the hiring manager as quickly as possible to make sure that that match is a good one. But I also understand what you're saying. Neutral language, sometimes AI means one thing to someone and a different thing to someone else. So maybe part of what we can do is be like, handle those varying levels of fluency and be like the interlocutor to sort of like interpret for both sides, right? And say like, okay, this person has 0 to 1, maybe in this particular domain, maybe they haven't shipped, but they have shipped another product, and sort of get to that like level of granularity. But I think one of the reasons that we're being asked for these very specific profiles that have all the things is because I think hiring managers understandably want to de-risk their hires as much as they can. And I don't know that I think that that's always the right direction to go, but because the market is so crazy, because funding is disappearing in a lot of different parts of the sector, people want to make sure that the hire that they make like really sticks. And I think they think that if we see enough data points that correlate to the domain someone has worked in and the domain they're going to work in, that's going to be a great fit. But I don't think that that's always the case. You can have great product thinkers who solved in one regulatory industry who might be able to apply those paradigms in a different industry. But yeah, I guess I'm curious for the rest of the folks on the panel, like, do you are you typically hiring more technical designers? Are you hiring more like conceptual designers, or sort of all the way across the spectrum? How are you seeing that change in the market?
I would say for me, it's more 90% is technical designers. The archetype, the typical archetypes that I see is three. So it's product designers who ship, design engineers, which is a great topic to discuss, by the way, and then brand designers. But like, again, technical brand designers. So that's another topic. But yeah, definitely more technical. And also leadership roles are changing a lot as well, which Meg, you'd be perfect to talk about.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam.
It's not as clear cut. It's super varied because the clients that I tend to work with is also super varied. So like one organization that is trying to be a little bit closer to the frontier, it is more technical and it leans a bit more towards what Tom's talking about. But then I have certain bigger like enterprise level clients that aren't even trying to chase the frontier yet, and it is more traditional product design, or some of the other like specialist skill sets that we don't really hear very often anymore. I got my first information architecture brief in like 6 years about 3-4 months ago, and I was like, Jesus, that's still something people are looking for. So it really depends on the context of the organization in terms of how they're structuring those teams, how far ahead they are in terms of developing that AI skill set, and really what it is they're ultimately trying to change. I think the big difference is like in one organization, it's still about building some of the foundations of design maturity, where others are super mature and trying to get further ahead in their delivery cycles and that kind of thing. And it's just very different stages of that whole journey, which starts to define the kinds of people they're looking for in that team.
I want to keep coming back to this one, but before I do, I ought to say that when I put the post out about this second recording, I put a call out, as many of you also did, for questions from people that they wanted to put to you. And I know you all had responses to that. I had over 1,000 DMs with questions. So I've done some work in kind of collating those, because obviously there was a lot of duplication in there. So I've done some work into collating those into themes, and I want to get through as many of those as possible. But I want to put it to you, the order that you want to go through those. And I know I'm kind of putting you on the hoof a little bit here because none of you have had any insight into seeing these in advance. As a group, you can choose from talking about portfolios, talking about working with recruiters, the sort of behind the scenes bit that no one really knows about. We can talk about AI. We can talk about the money conversation. We can talk about having a non-linear career path. We can talk about the human cost on both sides.
Can we not talk about AI? Can we not talk about that?
Yeah,
I think
can we not talk
we
about
talk about
AI?
that every day,
Agreed.
and I think it would be
All
really
right,
nice to have a non-AI conversation.
I love it. This is part of season 3, and most of season 3 we glide over AI because we talked about it to death in season 2. So I'm happy to have, from now on, this episode is an AI-free zone, apart from when it does come up naturally, because it probably will, because it's every bloody where.
You need to make a little like swear jar. Anytime someone says AI,
Yeah,
you've got to put a pound in and we'll all take it for a
Yeah.
drink.
Love it.
Because I do believe it's going to become just part of our day to day. It's just gonna be normal. It's just a tool.
Yeah.
So
So in that case, portfolios, working with recruiters, the money conversation, non-linear paths, or human cost. What do we feel like taking on first?
I don't know why, but I'm drawn to the non-linear career path thing. But
Okay.
Sure.
So the questions that came up around that aspect, some of them were in relation to things that had been said in the first episode, the first roundtable. For example, Meg, in the first roundtable, you described a squeeze where mid-level talent moves fast, but junior and senior get stuck. And a number of people wanted to know, is that still the shape of it, or has that changed?
I'm still seeing that that's a similar shape. Although interestingly, I feel like there are some folks at both ends of the spectrum who are more junior and who are more senior, who are leaning more into the topics that we were speaking about earlier, the one which shall not be named, as well as getting more technical and things like that. So it reminds me of sort of like, I know I harken back to the olden days sometimes, but it reminds me of when like designers were starting to use HTML and CSS, or when designers were starting to go mobile or things like that. It's like you always see these people across the spectrum who are sort of leaning into it a little bit more. So I think that's the way to get yourself unstuck, is to lean into one of the technical skills or AI skills that augments or builds on what you do already. So when you were talking, Sam, about like taking a brief for an information architect, it's like, you know, conversation designers now who a while ago were more like, okay, they're content designers, then they're conversation designers. Now they're designing at the AI layer, right? Like they're actually designing agentic AI products and things like that. And they're much closer to the product than even some visual design leading product designers are. So I think like it's this shift of how can you build on what you already have to leverage your skills in the current market.
Anyone want to add to that?
I had a brief this week that was weird. It was an IA with content strategy. Also, so like a UX writer almost, and an information
I
architect.
feel like that's where IA sits. Oh, sorry, lagging. I feel like that's where IA is sitting now anyway, more like content teams.
I guess so.
Teams.
I also haven't had an IA role in 100 years. So
yeah,
for me, I was like, interesting. And I was at an agency too. So I think what she wanted really was somebody who could do UX writing at the same time. So I don't know. In a way, it got me thinking about these other sort of areas that designers can do other than just being amazing with the word we cannot say, and different tools of that sort, I think. So I don't know. I'm sort of interested in like those other little areas, but I think a lot of like the soft skills too are really important, and namely communication skills. And I would implore people to take, I don't know, a Toastmasters class or something, some type of delivery or like presentation skills. I think a lot of the feedback I sometimes receive is not even just about like the portfolio anymore. It's really just about can they communicate to our developer team? And then they get dinged for not being able to vibe with them, I guess. And I feel like that's really unfair, to be honest. So I don't know, that's kind of where my head is thinking.
I think the non-linear career path is really interesting. Like, what do I do with the non-linear career path? And, you know, maybe the way that I kind of interpret that is often seeing really broadly skilled or kind of multidisciplinary people, you know, applying for a specific role, and sometimes, probably often, you know, struggling to get a kind of conversation with that hiring manager or get in the room to talk about that role with the client. And it's kind of interesting to think about that in line with what you were saying earlier, Meg, which is so many clients now want certainty, right? You want a sort of guarantee that you're making a really safe hire that's going to be kind of impactful. And lots of clients wouldn't, you know, often look at a non-linear career path and see, rightly or wrongly, see that sometimes as a safe hire to make. They'll often look at someone who's done exactly the same thing before. You've got all of the requirements on paper. You're the safe hire. So it's really interesting to think about how you know, coming from a non-linear career path can get in the room when lots of companies want that certainty from people.
So how do you, as a follow-up, and this is actually something that came up in the questions that were submitted, how do you best position a pivot or a career gap or something like that to be a strength rather than a weakness in those situations? Open to anyone.
I like to walk every candidate that I talk through their career from start to finish, and I'm a really good pattern matcher. So I think one of the things that's interesting about working with someone on their career is that even designers who are really great at telling other people's stories, right? Like maybe they're negotiating with stakeholders. They can talk to technical or non-technical stakeholders, explain the problem that needs to be solved, how we're going to use data and research to solve it, all that sort of thing. But when it comes to turning that lens on themselves or on oneself, it's really hard to do that, to take that step back and see the patterns. And so I think that's something that we're all uniquely positioned to do. So say, for example, if we'll use the information architect as an example. Someone with that background might have studied English literature or social anthropology or HCI or something different in college, made sort of like choices that got them down the content route or taxonomy route or something like that. And we can start tracing the path and telling the story in a way that makes sense and connects the line to where they are today. And that can be by anything like domain expertise, complexity of problems that you're solving, technicality of the tools and the products that you're working with, and things like that. But I think it's only when you take a step back and see the big picture, and then that's when you can help them to tell that story more confidently to clients, right? And to sort of own their story. So just as an example, I mean, I think most people know all of us as design recruiters, right? I mean, I've hired Oracle DBAs, Solaris admins, like, Android developers, you name it. But I control my narrative by articulating and really focusing on the thing I love. And so that's what I talk the most about. And then people have come to know me for that through my work. But could I hire an Oracle DBA? Sure. So I think it's the same thing for a designer, right? Like if you want to go the AI route, you want to be known for design engineering, make sure that that's articulated throughout your narrative, in your collateral, like your LinkedIn profile, your CV, your resume, and also the way that you tell your stories.
You mentioned there, Meg, I think that's great advice. And you mentioned there about those with a great variety of experience, and you spot the patterns, you connect the dots within that variety of experience. If you think about someone who doesn't necessarily have to be a variety, but has a lot of experience, is there a point where the market quietly starts working against them, someone who's highly experienced? And if there is, what would you say to them to do, or how would you help them with that? Again, open to everybody.
Ugh.
I think
Sh-
from a really...
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, go on, Meg. Can you finish your thought?
No,
and then
no,
I'll-
go on.
Apologies, maybe a bit of a delay there. I wanted to kind of bring something tangible because I agree with what everyone's saying here, and I think there's a real kind of issue in the market today for a certain degree, because all you hear about is like, we need generalists, we need all of these people, but then you talk about these people who are effectively generalists, who have got all these squiggly career paths and bringing all of this really rich experience in, and they can do a bunch of stuff, and then they kind of get rejected for that, and it creates this kind of, going back to Erica's word, confusion in people, and it's kind of a messy thing to navigate. And so I think to borrow on some of the stuff, there's a huge amount of like work with a great recruiter who can be that layer, who can help position you, who can be the translation layer. I think whether that's a recruiter or even to a friend, verbalizing things out loud and then helping to kind of sift that through is really helpful. But I think there's also one thing that I typically say to people is, if you do have a bunch of kind of holes that you might be able to go in, maybe it's brand design, maybe it's product design, maybe it's something, but there's nuance to it all. It's a tricky thing to balance, but try and have a kind of a CV that is a little bit more tailored to the thing that you are applying for. Because going back to what Toby was saying on the neutral thing, if you try and be everything to everyone with one CV, you're not going to be anything to anyone. And so I think if you can tangibly do something that is, I'm not saying for every single role necessarily. I mean, I know people are, and it's a lot of work to be putting in, but it's not about recreating yourself every time, but at least giving yourself a few different verticals and trying to align that. So you might have a product design CV, you might have a brand design CV, you might have something else. But I think if you can get a bit more tangible there, it will just stand you in better stead for trying to get in through those doors, really.
I feel like there's two things I like to think about when it comes to how to articulate someone's shape as a designer. And one is that you want to be findable. And two is that in all the noise, right? It's actually made it harder for us to find the people sometimes. It's like being findable. And then once you're findable, making sure that it's really clear what your expertise is. Findable is really basic. It's like keywords because, ultimately you want to take 1,000 applicants and boil it down to 100 or 50. And then the nuance comes into play when, okay, now you're one of those 50 that are being reviewed. Do you use metrics to, to determine and assess the outcome of the products that you're shipping? Have you shipped end to end? Are you hands-on? And so I guess back to the question, Adam, that you had about how leaders can position themselves. I mean, okay, ageism is not something that we can solve in this in this forum, but I think if I think about it from the point of a signal, and if we think of the objection that is being signaled, the objection might be, you're going to be too much money, you're going to want too big of a scope, you're not hands-on. Those are probably the biggest objections for leaders. So what a leader can then do is say, I'm going to describe how I'm a player coach. I'm going to describe how I was hands-on in the last project that I helped ship. And we came up with new paradigms for how to design that were outside of regular patterns. And maybe I'll make a signal about compensation by saying something like, I'm more motivated by the problem that I'm going to be solving than I am by, something else. So I think those are the two things, is like make yourself findable at the very basic level and then use the nuance to really counter any objections and make specific what your expertise is.
I think it follows on quite nicely to move away from the nonlinear and into the human cost group of questions. And I think it follows on quite nicely there. I would love to know, as would a number of people that sent in, what do you all wish that candidates understood about the person on the other side of the inbox? I love these quiet moments before the storm.
I don't mind to go first. I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I think people can share. I try to create a safe space in which people can share with me what their concerns are, because then we can deal with them more quickly. And I think a lot of candidates come into conversations with recruiters thinking they have to pitch from the first second, right? And if you're pitching and you say everything that you do it the best, then that makes it more challenging for me to get signal on what you're actually really good at. Is it product thinking? Is it interaction design, brand design, identity, development, things like that? So I think just being open and consultative and sort of, asking for feedback, giving feedback, because I think then everyone can get to the place that they're trying to go a little bit faster. Curious what you all think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that sometimes I run into people who are nervous to tell me as much as they would tell like a hiring manager. So it's again like being human, right? And just like having a conversation with me, tell me everything from start to finish. Sometimes I get on a call with someone and they're just like really, really brief. And it makes it really, really hard for me to see how I can sell them to a client. So I find myself like explaining to people. And this is not even juniors, this is senior people because they've been having conversations constantly and they're tired. But we like to put a story together. And similar to what Meg said about, from start to finish, like tell me everything. But I think, yeah, I don't know. I think on the other end, we are on your side. That's like the biggest thing. And yeah, we just need information. Like I need tons of information to sell you. And one thing I've actually been doing recently is I have been sharing the write-ups that I send to clients, to the candidates, which I posted about a couple of weeks ago. It's like, have you ever asked your recruiter like how they're pitching you? And people were like, what? You could do that? You do that? So I've been sending them, and obviously I put all my notes into, a ChatGPT or something and have it sort of create something strong. But that's been really helpful, I think, in allowing them to see that we are like actually working for them.
I'd love to know what doing this job takes out of you all.
I think I don't like speaking to people on the weekends because I speak to so many people. No, but I think seriously, I would love to help everyone. My biggest problem has always been in my career saying no. I've only just sort of like learned to do that over the last year. Even with like clients, I just like love helping everyone. I just want to help everyone. And we can't. So like we work for the client. We don't work for they're the ones that pay the bills. Obviously candidates are super, super important, but we just we can't help everyone. And I think letting people down, like when you see some people who have invested so much time and energy into, going overseas to on-site prepping and you see sort of like, how they react to it. And it's like, oh, it's a lot. That definitely is the worst bit for me, this job. But I also think that helps you build really strong relationships with people because you're there and you tell them the truth, you're transparent. And I think people do appreciate that.
Sam, it looked like you had something to add.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say very similar things to Tom in that I also, I like social battery runs dry Monday to Friday. And by the weekend, I just don't want to have to speak to people anymore. And also in a similar way, have a real problem saying no. Like I want to help more people. And it's why some of the coaching stuff and various other things really started to kick in. I think there is limits to that, and actually gets to the point where if you say yes too much or try and do too much, you end up helping almost nobody. I also think there is a big, coming back to the point even before the like what we lose and what takes out of us, is there is this like translation piece that happens in the middle that often people don't necessarily recognize. Because I'll use the term product designer as an example. Most job descriptions and job ads that you see published will talk about almost the identical things as a description, but once you have a conversation with the client, the real definition of what they need tends to not be exactly the same. But most of the time, candidates won't necessarily see that translation piece in between. And so where they'll be going on face value of what they've seen published online somewhere. We've then got to have a conversation about what the realities are. And we can't have that conversation with absolutely everybody that gets in touch. I think we had a conversation about this previously on the last one around, there are limits to how many actual conversations and what depth of feedback we can give to every single applicant and so on. I think there is a reality that happens in between where fits that look like they could be a fit aren't necessarily, and it's context that we might only be privy to.
Anyone else want to add anything to this, please?
Yeah, I can add something. We've got a kind of pretty tangible example from this week. Obviously, won't go into too much detail, but just in terms of that, I think is just to build on it is you do want to help everyone, and the market hasn't been in the nicest possible way great for the last few years, and people have really been struggling with that. And you hear some really horrible kind of heart-wrenching stories about people who have really been kind of suffering for the last few years, who have found it really difficult, and all you want to do is help them, but you have the roles that you have and they might not be the right kind of shape for that, but they're trying to squeeze themselves into that shape because they're really kind of looking for something, and it's really difficult, but you do have to have that very kind of frank conversation with them. Ultimately, it's better for them. Like, they shouldn't, as difficult as it is not having a role, like, I can sympathize with that as best I can, but like, you don't want to be in the wrong role either. It's not going to help anyone. And so those conversations are difficult, and it's when they kind of keep pushing and going, no, 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 this is me, and you've got to go, well, no, it's not. And that's a really tough thing to deal with, but it's always a kind of trying to help them realize, to go, okay, well, show me that then. If you're it's a lot of kind of I'm telling you that I can do this, and go, well, show me. And the way I always go about that, or Jake, whatever, will be like, okay, so it's not about this conversation between me and you. It's going back to that translation layer. This isn't me trying to be really difficult. And I think if there's something that you kind of go back to your question of like, what would we like others to know, is I know, so the recruiters aren't the bad guys here. We're really trying to help everyone. And ultimately, it's not us blocking, it's us trying to do the best for our clients, to Tom's point, and the best for our candidates in the best way that we can with the time that we've got. And it's a waste of the candidate's time, it's the waste of our time, it's the waste of the hiring manager's time for us to put someone in front of them if we know that it's not going to go anywhere. So it's this kind of cruel to be kind of like, we're telling you no because we don't want you to waste your time trying to do all of this stuff, go into a hiring process that we know the hiring manager's going to go, no, I don't like that one, or that one's not the right fit. So it's kind of trying to be the bad cop for a good reason sometimes as well, and trying to get that across can be difficult. I mean, it's not a nice thing to hear either, but it's as much as you can do it with kind of empathy and consideration, I think is the best thing, really.
I can relate to that very much, Laura, about, how I think you said it, to be cruel to be kind. It's like it can hurt because we all want to be helpers, and I think we all have that in common. And one of the things I think I learned working at Meta, when everything was in a hyperscale and everything that you're doing is sort of being evaluated for the impact, good or bad. And my career, sort of before I got into recruiting, was in arts and cultural organizations, and we always focus on a double bottom line. So how much positive social impact are we having, and how much positive financial impact are we having? And I think when, like us, our identity is wrapped up in being good, it can be helpful to think, how can we give back to all those people who we can't touch in our daily life, right? In our daily work. And so some of the things that we've started to do, we're on our path towards B Corp. It's probably going to take a while to get there. But on that path is like, how do we measure the positive impact we have on the vast majority of the community, which we're maybe not one-on-one interacting with on a daily basis? And so some of the things that we started doing is just like blog posts about like, how can we bring together resources for people of underrepresented backgrounds to have access to job opportunities? How can we help people who have disabilities to find places that are looking to hire someone like them? And that doesn't really, it's not a financially motivated move. It's more of like, we do this because it makes us feel like, okay, well, we're at least giving back a little bit to our community that we love so much. So when folks come to us, and instead of saying, sorry, we can't help, it's not for this particular role, but here's some great resources that you can use in the meantime to work on your portfolio, to get involved in these communities, to have access to job networks you might not normally. And then hopefully that comes back, or like creates a ripple. I mean, it probably sounds a little bit idealistic, but I feel like that can actually help when you're a helper, to do the things that help at scale. So then you can focus on the key job that you need to do in order for your business to run. At least that's what I'm telling myself.
I think it also helps soften that blow, right? As a on the other side of that conversation, if we're being told like in no uncertain terms, like you were saying, Laura, there has to be a point where if someone's not hearing the subtle no, you have to be a bit firmer with your no, you're not right for this role. Having to then also the ability to then make, to your point, say, but just have a look at all of this. There's a whole trove of resources over here that you might find helpful, that might help you with the next piece or what have you. And I think there is a piece that is on us, the applicants, to say, when we hear a no, respect the no, and say, okay, I know I'm in a desperate situation, but like you was saying, Laura, do I really want to be in a just as shitty a situation where I don't really know what I'm doing and I'm kind of making it up as I'm going along just because I want to try and get somewhere, as opposed to focusing on hearing the feedback, understanding this isn't quite right, putting all your energy into something that is right, that is going to serve you and the organization well.
The other, this is maybe a kind of question back the other way, kind of, Adam, but I think the other thing, and maybe this is something that I'd love everyone to know when I give them feedback, is I'm always trying to give, obviously like useful feedback, but perhaps sometimes we feel like we're treading on eggshells in exactly how we deliver that feedback and what we deliver. And sometimes you said there, Adam, like, if someone's not getting the subtle, cue that they're not right for the role. And the reality is there are so many applicants out there that want the subtle cues, There are probably other applicants out there screaming for the like hardcore, give me like the full, feedback, 'cause that's what I think is going to be really useful. And sometimes as recruiters, we don't always know that level of feedback that people want. And I don't necessarily think that's a useful thing. There's probably a lot of utility in the, in the more kind of hardcore feedback, but we don't always know exactly what to give based on what people need.
And it's difficult, isn't it? Because no matter how much you, like Meg and Erica, you were saying, you sit with the candidate and you go through their whole history and have that long conversation with them to try and get to know them. Someone might say, yeah, I'm completely fine to have the super harsh feedback. Absolutely, bring it on. And they really might not be, so there's a pitfall there. I know that we didn't touch on this last time, so I would love to come to it, because I also had feedback that people had wished that we had, the money conversation. So I'd love your thoughts and insights on when a candidate should raise salary, and are there any like hard and fast rules as to, like who should do the first number and that kind of thing?
I personally think as early as possible in the process to get, are you in range? Is this going to be realistic? Because there's nothing worse getting to the end of the process and you're like totally mismatched. But so I think as soon as possible. It should be part of that. Normally, if it's through an external recruiter, you would have that conversation for them when you send them to the candidate, the client. It's like, this person wants such and such. If you're doing it through an internal recruiter or team, that should be part of their first screener as well. And they should have comp bands.
Yeah. Is it required to have comp bands in the UK? Because it is here in most states now. Like if it's not listed in the job description, no.
Felicia, Meg.
No, I don't think it's required.
It's not, but if we are reaching out to folks in the United States, then it is required by the state that they're
right.
So we just as a general practice, just we ask for it, but we don't ask what they're currently making. We ask what their requirements are.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if this is a kind of side point. I agree with Tom's point on, salary should be raised early to minimize kind of time wastage and kind of maximize alignment. The one thing that I always find really interesting with like comp and salary ranges is, and I had an old friend that used to work in this space in kind of building these out, almost like competency frameworks for tech companies, and then that would connect to the kind of salary and comp banding that they have. I think one of the big frustration that applicants see is a company might say, well, look, I'm paying, £90,000 to £110,000 for this role, or even a broader range, but actually finds it very difficult to articulate what a £90,000 candidate looks like versus a £110,000 candidate. And that can sometimes leave applicants in the dark a little bit with like, how do I know where I fit for you when I don't know exactly what kind of each sort of salary rung within the role looks like, if that makes sense. So So maybe this is a hope and dream for the future, but I wish there's more clarity on that for sure.
I just tell people to like flat out ask them, is there a certain leveling change? Like, I feel like you have to take control of your own destiny, right? It's same with interviewing, when people go in to an interview and they don't actually know what the hiring manager is looking for because no one told them before. Like, you have to ask right from the beginning, like, hey, do you want me to be like really like in depth here and granular and get into it? Or would you like a more higher level overview because we only have 30 minutes? And you have to control it. So same with it's easier said than done. It's very hard to do for yourself. But I think coaching people, I do tell them, think about salary that you need, like, in your mind, right? Like your absolute floor, and then obviously go higher if it's in the range. In the US, we have crazy ranges. They're like 130 to 300K. So it's like comical, really. And it's because they're hoping to see like all different levels of people applying and sort of whatever, but it's like the worst strategy I've ever seen. So yeah, I always just sort of say, I think it usually has to do with like years of experience, I guess. Like if you have 5 years of experience, you're probably like in the lower end-ish or whatever, middle. But if you have if you're a lead, you would probably be on the top end. But I also think that you can say, like, this is what I'm interviewing at. I usually tell people like I'm interviewing at this range, and also make it a smaller range. Don't make it a 30K range. And then you can say that you're flexible, maybe a little like afterwards. But I would just like the hardest part, I think, is saying the number and then like pausing and just like waiting for the response.
I think one of the other hard parts is that there are probably two different types of money conversation that will happen, because a money conversation that I have with a candidate will really be trying to help them benchmark and understand their position in the market and what's realistic and that kind of thing. Whereas then there is a negotiation conversation where they might be having a direct applicant process with a client, and that becomes a little bit different to navigate because you don't want to underprice or overprice and various other things to go against. It also is made, and admittedly from looking at the market right now, right, has made it much harder right now with these wide bandings that we see across every level. We've got the same thing in the UK as you're probably seeing, where quite literally anything from like 90 to 200K is a senior designer salary at the moment, depending on the organization and the team and all kinds of other things, which makes it very hard for someone to sit and kind of self-reflect on their own level if they were outside of their own organization. That's where I do encourage conversations with people like ourselves to just really understand what the wider market is looking like outside of the inside of your own organization, and what you might be able to see, and what your own, I suppose, capability and skills leveling starts to look like in those markets. I do agree with Toby as well that actually there isn't really a clear definition of what the difference between those rungs in certain organizations really is, but then we will still have a rough barometer of what we're looking for at different levels. I mean, often the only time I ever really ask a candidate what they're earning right now is if, for whatever reason, when I say what they're looking for, I feel like there's some weird disconnect somewhere, and I need to try and unpack that and understand where those numbers have come from, because that does happen, right? Sometimes people are in a position either really low, and I'm like, okay, well, you could be earning much better, or really high, and to then leave and try and better that elsewhere can be difficult. So yeah, there is layers to the money conversation, I think.
You mentioned about the negotiation conversation, Sam. Like, what's the most common mistake that people make in that negotiation, and what does it cost them?
I suppose there is a tendency, particularly if you're not used to negotiating, to jump in with a number without context. So some of the things we've talked about here are really important questions to be asking, even in a conversation with during an interview process. Like, what do you view as the difference between someone coming in at the lower banding versus the higher banding? What are your expectations for X or Y? And so on. And also just getting a clear upfront answer from the organization of what the banding for this particular role is. I've heard many a story of people being asked what their expectation is, and without any context given a number, and that has almost immediately ruled them out, whether or not it was rightly or wrongly so. just because the number has fallen outside, the candidate's just thrown a stab in the dark number, and it could have potentially been avoided. We don't really know. I think that the first is just making sure you're getting clear on what some of those boundaries are before throwing definitive numbers out. Bandings do tend to help, giving a range of I'm looking between here and here, depending on scope of role and expectations and various other things. That gives room for some negotiation at the later stages as well. Those are the big ones that I can think of anyway.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I think in the startup space right now, everyone wants the AI experience. They want the PD, PM, and visual design craft and AI expertise, and they want to pay 125, 135 euros for it. And it's like, but then they'll say, but if you find someone really great and they're outside of the range, just bring them to us anyway. The number of times that ends up working out is very small. So I think like pushing on that and getting a real, like, are we talking a couple thousand more pounds? Or are we talking 10, 20, 30,000 more pounds? Because again, that can really waste cycles of getting candidates involved. And also just, it gives us an opportunity to be real with the client. Like the folks who have the AI expertise right now, they're not making, they don't, it's very unlikely they're going to accept those lower salaries unless if you happen to be working in, a mission-driven organization that they're just particularly lit up by. So just being real and honest that their expectations of what they're going to be able to hire for their budget is correct, and sort of consulting with them and giving in, using your industry knowledge as best as you can to advise if there's something that they're going to need to be flexible on. Yeah.
I think one thing, like just in this topic, sorry, Sam, do you want to go? Because I'm might about to slightly take a tangent. So if you want to talk on this, I don't know.
I just very quickly was just a bit of like a side thought on this topic and a bit of an open question to all of you as well. The thing that I also find quite interesting and sometimes do have to talk to candidates about is some people feel like they need to negotiate all of the time just because it's like part of the process, where actually if the conversation's been led the right way, you might not need to negotiate at all. I even have that with clients. Sometimes I have to push back on a client to be like, why are we going in at these numbers and not these numbers? We could, negate negotiations altogether. There is an element of that on both sides where actually if we've established the range is the range, people's numbers are in the right range, are you negotiating for the sake of it or because you actually feel like you're going to be in the wrong realm? That was the only thing.
I mean, I'll weave my thing slightly into that. I think that there's a maybe dubious link there. What I was going to say is in the kind of thinking about holistically of ranges and benchmarking yourself, I typically say, like, don't just go straight for the top. Like if you're given the range, there's a sort of an instinct to go, okay, well, if that's the most I can get, I'm just going to put myself there. And there's probably a number of reasons to not do that. But I think one thing that kind of gets missed out, and I see it both from a design agency side and from the talent kind of consulting standpoint as well, is like, I always say, like, think about your career. It's more than just this like one moment. And I think when you see a banding, it's not just a hiring process. You've got to think about the organization behind it, and what they're telling you is this is the comp level for people within this kind of level and this kind of bracket. And therefore, if you think, okay, a year or two down the line, if I want progression, if I want to move my role forward, if I want not necessarily a promotion just in title, but also I want more money. If I go straight in at the top, it's going to be really difficult for me to kind of continue to move forward unless I'm that superstar person that's just going to be able to skip levels really quickly. But that's not the case for a lot of people. And so actually, if let's say your range is like, I don't know, like 80 to 100, if you position yourself at like the 90 or at least the 95 mark, you at least have like a bit of a wiggle room for future conversations to say, actually, what does my progression look like here? So I just wanted to say, like, from like, I guess to answer your question, Sam, maybe, yeah, it's not just fit comfortably within the range. Don't always try to push it, but always also think about it less as just a banding for a process and more about banding for your kind of career path as well, and how you want to navigate that.
Coming off the back. Oh, sorry, Toby, go on.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think as well, like, and this is more a recruiter specific thing. If you're working with a recruiter, I just always advise people to understand like where they sit within the shortlist that the recruiter's putting forwards to the client. Not in a sense that the recruiter's going to go, oh yeah, I'm putting Sam Gale forwards for this job. You know, we're not going to like start giving data away like that. But if you're, you know, if where does your skill set experience stack versus the other people, you know, in the shortlist? Because you got a job paying like 90 to 110. You know, most recruiters aren't just going to put everyone across at 110, regardless of their skill set. Their client will see through that. They'll ask questions on why. And if you put yourself at the top against people that have slightly more experience or more slightly aligned experience, you're probably going to lose out on an interview. Whereas if you position yourself at, you know, where you arguably should be, then you're much more likely to get into the process, in my experience.
We're coming up on time. You've been amazing. So I want to hit a spicy round, a quick fire round. So these are all questions open to any of you to answer that have all come in. What is the biggest myth about recruiters that you would like to kill right now on recording?
That we're transactional only.
I don't know if it's a myth for recruiters like us, but I don't use any AI to screen your applications. It's all me.
Yeah, I second that.
Yeah, third that one. And I was going to say, I think what it sounds, Adam, like we did a pretty good job on the last one, but we're human. We're not robots sitting behind a weird, like, screech and opaque screen.
Right.
Yeah.
Meg, any myth that you'd like to put to rest?
I think just the reason that we're not getting back to you is because we just don't have the we don't have the number of minutes and hours in the day
Right.
to respond to everyone. And I think, Erica, you talked about this the last time and it was really touching. It's like, I think you said something like you say a little wish to every person that how did you say it the last time?
I don't remember. I say I'm sorry, I think, if I read an email and I know that I can't help this person or respond to them at that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's like we are working and we're working to do the very best that we can at our job. And the non-answers are not because of lack of care or consideration. It's just based on our bandwidth as a human being. And keep trying.
One other myth, at least from I think most of us in this room anyway, is we're not just keyword matching to job descriptions. And that there's a lot more depth to understanding whether or not someone fits a role.
3 more questions. We're nearly there. We're nearly at the finish line. Next one, and I expect every one of you has an answer to this. I don't know whether any of you will give an answer to this. What's one thing that every hiring manager does that you'd wish they'd stop?
Expect us to work without being paid. Like on contingency, purely on contingency, like to actually put in man or woman or person hours without being paid.
Nice.
Especially for people, I think at our level, like we offer so much expertise and really the amount of hours that we put into a search is significant. So just and I think most clients appreciate that. And it's usually one person that holds the budget strings and another person that holds the, bring in a recruiter strings. So sometimes it's not exactly the same person, but yeah.
The question was, what do we wish that they would stop doing?
One thing every hiring manager does that you'd wish they'd stop.
Not giving feedback that's usable.
I was going to actually say clarity of feedback. I think one thing that people tend to do regularly is this person isn't quite right, but doesn't then define what that means.
Right.
Or particularly in design, and then particularly when it comes to more like visually leaning briefs, the one I hate is I'm just not wowed. What does that mean?
Right.
It's the
Yeah.
recruiter's version of make it pop, right?
I was just going to say make it pop. Yeah.
Put my two hats on, I can feel like icked
Yeah.
by both sides.
Yeah. Double ick. Toby, is there anything that hiring managers do that absolutely bug you? If you like, I can kind of pixelate you and distort your voice if you want to like properly go for.
Why me? Why me specifically? Do you think I'm going to say something bad?
I should have said that right at the beginning for all of you. Yeah, that feels like I'm singling you out. It's not what I mean.
Yeah, not like. I think sometimes the one thing I would say, and maybe this is useful for kind of like applicants to know, is like sometimes we get ghosted too for like a period of time, and it's very rare, and there's again normally like some good reason for it, but I wish sometimes hiring managers wouldn't do that. Like just go totally quiet on something. They can always give us the brutal feedback or the honest feedback. We can take it.
What's a trait that you see in a candidate that makes you quietly certain that someone's going to get hired? I know this might be a difficult question to answer because it might vary, but is there a golden trait?
I think I think ability to listen and receive feedback well, and then like ask good questions. Someone who's like, and then showing kind of like general excitement, which I know is hard to do, especially if you've been applying to 300 roles and interviewing and trying to keep your head on straight. It's really quite exhausting. I think that like personality coming through.
I think. Sorry, you go, Meg.
I was going to say for me, I think it's a triangulation of hard skills relative to the job, self-awareness about what their skills are, their gaps and their strengths, and low ego, so that they're more likely to be highly collaborative. How about you, Toby?
Nice.
I think when I look back at kind of the patterns, people that read the room really well at all stages of the kind of process, like you can just tell from like an initial email you get from someone whether they've got good level of like empathy and they've read what you're looking for well, and that follows through. And I 100% agree with Meg. Like it's always like the low ego, slightly kind of like unassuming people that normally do really well in processes for me.
Yeah, I actually think that triangulation kind of nailed it, to be honest. I was going to say self-awareness on its own, but I think those three coming together is a pretty good definition of what makes a clear formula.
Laura, anything to add?
I think it's all been said really well. The only thing I'd maybe add to sort of bring that all together is the storytelling piece, and actually how they kind of communicate. I mean, obviously the ego stuff, there's an element of storytelling, but it's also just kind of how you hold yourself and portray yourself. But I think if the people that I either get really disappointed by or excited by are either the ones that look great on paper, but then kind of fall down when it comes to that storytelling piece. So when you actually meet them, and then vice versa, you can have people that you don't get hugely excited about just looking at a CV, but when you're in front of them, they've got that incredible ability that Meg was saying to sort of bring all of that to life and kind of really communicate well, not just about their work, but about them as a person as well. And those are the people that I find exciting, and clients tend to as well, because I think they can see the way that they would portray themselves in their work as well.
I think actually coming back to the ego thing, there is a bit of a balance somewhere though, because sometimes low ego can be almost too unassuming and too, for loss of a better word, soft. There is an element of confidence that comes with being quite self-aware, really knowing where your skills lie, what you're looking for in your career, and what's right for you and what's next. That combined with an element of low ego and really just understanding and empathy really tends to show when someone really understands, like, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm looking to do, I know the job, I know what I've been, I know my skills, my experience, I can talk you through it, I can answer questions, but at the same time I'm not doing that with any real bravado. That tends to really come together.
Confidence versus arrogance. It's sort of the equivalent of a handshake, right? You really don't want that kind of wet drip, almost fingers stroking the underside of your palm, but you also don't want your arm ripped off. You want somewhere in between, somewhere in the middle. Which brings us nicely to the very last question. You gave your words for how you feel the market is right now. Don't worry, I'm not going to test you to see whether you remember what you said an hour and 12 minutes ago. I want you to think a year ahead from now. What word would you hope you're saying if I'm asking you this again? And what word do you think you might realistically be saying in a year from now?
The optimist in me wants to say clarity, where in a year's time we've all got things are a little bit more understood in terms of direction, what's happening, dust has settled a bit. That momentum piece it's not messy momentum, it's clearer. But I think the reality is going to be we're still going to be seeing things a little bit messy.
Agreed. I would say I would like it to be more human. Like, I would like a lot of the automations that we're seeing emerge in our tools help us to spend more time being human and doing that part of our job best. Although I think because of that messiness, it's probably going to be in peaks and troughs with different clients and different roles and different tools, like where we can lean in and be more human and where we have to work on automating so that we can buy ourselves the time back to be more human.
Erica, what's your 2 words?
These are my wishes. I hope it is leveling out, I think, because I think about a year ago when I did this MasterCard event for a panel that I'm on, and we were talking about AI and like how to stay relevant. And it was chaos then, still kind of messy now, but I'm hoping that it'll level out. So somewhat clarity. And then the other word I was thinking of was like, I just hope that we are free kind of the mess and that people have been able to either specialize again or leveled up again kind of, or I just think I see like freedom. I don't know, I'm hoping for that for people.
Nice. Toby, what's your pair?
The hopeful, optimistic side of me hopes that there's much more calm, I think, for people. Like, I'd love this world where people, looking for jobs feel calm about it and not panicked about it. I think in a year's time we'll have much more clarity on things. I just don't know if that's going to be like in the good sense of that word. I think we'll have much more clarity on like where things are heading and what that means for people. I just don't know if that's a good or a bad thing yet. But hopefully things feel calmer.
Nice. Laura, bring us home.
Oh God, Adam, you've given me the last word. Okay, I feel like with the last word, we need to, maybe I need to stick with exciting and keep it really positive. I don't know. I mean, exciting. I think reframing that more, I'd say maybe opportunity would be my word. not to be the kind of the downer at the end of the episode, but I think there might be clarity, but I still think there's going to be a lot of uncertainty and everything else. I think we're just things are just continually shifting at the moment, and we might be clearer on some things, but there'll be some new things as well. So I think there's going to be this kind of constant tension. But I think the reason I say opportunity is, I know it's a horrible, like, it's not a nice thing to be in a state of uncertainty, but it's where design as an industry and as a whatever can really thrive. And that's why I say there's opportunity there, because I think if we can do the work, I guess from talent side, and then I'm thinking from design as well, kind of split myself in half. I think there's so much work to be done always to kind of show the value of what design can bring. And in a world that is slightly uncertain, that feels a little bit messy, I'm not saying designers are the only people that can do this, but there's a huge opportunity for them to do that and help the people around them navigate the uncertainty that we're all kind of working in times that feel like they're shifting. So yeah, I'll go with opportunity.
Love it. Thank you. In alphabetical order, Erica, Laura, Meg, ST, Sam, Toby, Tom. It's hot. It's been a long day. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining and sharing your insights yet again. I know that there is a huge amount here for those that will eventually listen and watch this episode to gain from it. I really appreciate your time. So thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thanks for having
Thank you for having us. Good to see you all again.
Yeah.
You too.
See you soon.
See you all in
Stay
6
cool,
months. Yeah.
everyone.
Thanks for tuning in. If you're feeling stuck or want to think out loud about where you're heading, remember that you don't have to figure that all out on your own. I offer a free 15-minute conversation to anyone who wants help figuring out what's in front of them. Whether that leads to us working together or not doesn't matter. What matters is that you have someone in your corner, even if it's just for those 15 minutes. Head to growwithadamjennings.com and book your call. I'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the show so that you don't miss the rest of season 3. There is some absolute gold coming your way. So until next time, keep creating, keep questioning, and above all else, keep going.